You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Haristodoulou.
What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristodoulou, and today, continuing on with our NFL Draft Preview series, I'm going over the Philadelphia Eagles and going over a couple of players I would like to see them go after in this year's NFL Draft. So, Eagles fans, make sure you fire away in that comment section down below. Let me know who you want to see the Eagles go after, players you're interested in but aren't sure maybe if the Eagles could grab them because of their positioning in the draft, or just maybe they're picking at 10 and 30 in the first round. So, I mean, options are aplenty for them, but maybe a guy that you want that you don't feel good enough about taking at pick 10, but is probably not going to be that number 30 you might miss out on, something like that along those lines. I'd love to hear all your thoughts and opinions, so make sure you comment down below. But how I'll be doing this one here, like I said, I'm going over a couple of players. I'm focusing on the first round selections for this one here. I think it's really fun that a team that was just in the Super Bowl has the opportunity to pick one in the top 10, but two twice in the very first round of the draft. So you have a legitimate opportunity to fill up some holes because you did lose some players in free agency that were key starters for your defense, and ultimately just kind of reload and try to run it back again for another Super Bowl appearance next year. Starting with round 1, pick number 30. This selection here, almost towards the end, or at pretty much the end of the first round, I was kind of up in the air with what I wanted to do with the Eagles on this one here. There's a number of ways you could go because, like I said, this team is really just kind of reloading, and it almost feels like you could just kind of go best player available. But one thing that came to mind, and based off of just the potential of this guy being available, was trying to find a replacement at safety after losing Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Now, I'll say this first. I know Terrell Edmunds is over there now, but do I think he is the long-term starting answer and a guy who equates to the loss of Johnson? Don't really think so. However, I do think that there is potential for a safety, and I'm talking Alabama's safety, Brian Branch, being available at this number 30 selection here. This is a if he's available at this spot, I think you should go ahead and take him. I would really like them to try to prioritize and make sure they get this guy and don't miss out on him, but I don't know just how much the Eagles would be looking to trade up in the draft to draft a safety. He is probably the best safety in this draft class, and I would probably say a lot of people would argue that he is absolutely, but at the very least, he's probably the best safety in the draft at 6 feet, 190 pounds. The guy has excellent zone coverage skills. He's a fantastic tackler. He's lined up everywhere in the secondary on defense. He's lined up in the box, in the slot, out deep, outside corner a handful of times. He's always up at the line of scrimmage. He's not afraid to get in there and chase after the quarterback. I mean, the guy literally can do everything for you. He is such a like a Swiss Army knife as a safety. There's just so much to like about him and what he could possibly do for a defense. And I really like this addition for the Eagles here. He's a bit grabby. There are things he's going to have to work on getting himself into the pros. From one thing that a lot of people seem to be concerned with is just the true lack of college production. Yes, he had a fantastic 2022 season, but prior to that, you could argue he was like average to slightly above average, so not necessarily like blowing you away compared to how his final season was. But if going off of last season and knowing that he played at Alabama against some of the best teams in the NCAA while he was in the SEC, you should feel pretty comfortable with what you're getting in Brian Branch, and I think he would be a phenomenal selection for the team. I'm not 100% certain, to be honest, that he's going to be here at the number 30 spot. So like I said early, this is kind of one of those, like, if he's there, you have to go ahead and snag him. I've seen some people say that he's like a mid to late first round selection, or like a very early top 10 in the second round type of selection guy at the absolute latest. And that is something I've only seen in like a very handful of places. And I've done some mock drafts myself personally, and it seems like a lot of people assume that there's a good possibility he's gone within the first round, and that like mid to bottom half of the first round is the possibility of where he goes. So that's probably where you're going to see him. Like I said, I don't know if he's going to be there at 30, but if he's there, I certainly think the Eagles need to consider this selection. Now, as for pick number 10, this is wild to think about because you have a team that was playing in the Super Bowl picking within the top 10 of this year's draft class. That's absolutely insane to think about. Typically, those top picks are reserved for some of the bottom feeders of the league, and you have a team that's already fantastic getting an opportunity to draft a guy who could be a legitimate difference maker from day one or a legitimate star for at least 5 to 10 years for your team. I would like to see the rich get richer on the defensive front with this pick here. And while I was weighing options and trying to come up with a guy that I felt pretty confident in being available at number 10, because I do think that there's a possibility we see a couple of edge rushers go early in that first 10 picks, and it all just kind of boils down to what the teams like most about the edge rushers in this class, because there's like 3 or 4 guys that you could really fall in love with, and whether it's like the potential upside or just how cleaned up and ready to go they are, but they're not quite the physical specimen of some of the other top edges are, there's a lot of ways you could go about doing this. And obviously I'm kind of hinting at it. I'm looking at an edge rusher here. I thought about interior D-line, but I would really like to see them double down on just fortifying the pass rush that they have going on over there in Philadelphia. And I like edge rusher Myles Murphy out of Clemson. At 6'5", 258 pounds. The guy has fantastic strength, fantastic explosiveness. He is the type of guy that you want lined up on your side of the football field. He's someone that you could plug into a multitude of places, whether it's over or outside the offensive tackle, in the B gap. He even has like good size to fit within the A gap for like a snap or two here and there, so you can kind of mix up the defensive front. That's just how awesome he is physically. He has really great use of his hands, but it's inconsistent. That was probably one of the pros/cons I found about him, is everyone's like, his handwork is awesome, but he's just not consistently awesome with it. So there are obviously the things that you worry about. Like, he's not the most technically sound guy. Like I said, when you're talking about the edge rushers in this draft class, those like top 4 or 5 guys, it's like supreme physical specimens or guys that are like super technically sound and really pro ready with their toolbox, but they're not like the most physically imposing guys, I guess you could say. And he falls more along the sides of, he's more raw, and a lot of his issues that he has with his game stem from like technical things, whether he's just not sinking low enough in his rushes, or maybe he needs to add some more pass rushing moves to his repertoire, things like that. So I think that this is a perfect candidate in selection, and a guy that I think should be available. I think some teams might favor more along the side of going after the guys that just feel a little bit more pro ready, whereas Myles Murphy offers you an opportunity. Yes, you're picking him at 10, but he does not necessarily need to just get going right out of the gate. You have already a very strong defensive front where he can come in, learn from some real savvy veterans, guys that have been around the game for a long time now over there in Philadelphia, and he can learn those technical skills that he needs, learn from those experienced players there that have done it and done it at a really high level. And then from there, you can start, midway through the season, really starting to put him in and start to fill in the holes, or I guess like fill in those spots where you really need to have a guy. And then once you ultimately lose, say like Fletcher Cox and or Brandon Graham next season, which, because I'm surprised that you were able to keep them both this offseason, to be honest with you. But if you end up losing one of those guys to either retirement or maybe they go somewhere else because their production dips, you don't want to pay them as much as they're asking for, yada, yada, yada. You have a guy ready and in the wings, and just he can be set to go for day one next season. Again, I know you're picking him at number 10, and when you think a number 10 selection, yeah, you want a guy that's like ready to go off the jump, and he's going to be a contributor. But one thing that I've really appreciated about the Philadelphia Eagles over the last, it feels like at least 5 to 7 years or so, has just been their ability to build out depth in the front seven and just continue to do so year after year after year after year. I respect it, and it's clearly a winning formula. They won a Super Bowl a handful of years ago. They just made it back to another Super Bowl, and both of those defenses had something very similar in common. Excellent pass rushing. They were able to disrupt the passing game completely and shut things down. It's unfortunate the playing field in the Super Bowl was absolute buns, because I firmly believe if it wasn't, the Eagles probably end up winning that Super Bowl game. But if there's one thing I do know, if you have an excellent pass rush and you can disrupt what teams are trying to do through the air, you can be successful. And adding a guy like Myles Murphy, who again, he has so much potential upside, he just needs to learn those technicalities and those skills from the veterans that you have already there in Philadelphia. This would be a excellent selection in the long run for Philly. But those are two guys I would like to see the Eagles go after in this year's draft class. They're for their first round selections. Again, Eagles fans, I'd love to know what you all think in the comment section down below. So let me know your thoughts and opinions. I appreciate you if you made it all the way to the end of this video. I will see you all next time. Have a good one.